So in artography, the processes of inquiry do not seek to necessarily relay what happened in an encounter with materials, but rather it alludes to a condition in which a researcher and teacher might find herself while doing, making, and creating. Um, it considers art as a meeting place. So with an artographic orientation, the aesthetic experience of reconfiguring material and thinking through a phenomenon into unfamiliar forms enables us to rethink not only something's physical or conceptual boundaries, but also its ontologies, how it is that it exists in the world and gathers meaning. So this sort of artistic thinking requires small rebellions of thought in a moment of interaction in which Maxine Greene says that old either-ors may disappear, and we might collaboratively make possible a pluralism of visions, of a multiplicity of realities. So in this way, the arts are not additions to something or add-ons to some other element, educator-directed activities, or an idealized example of children's inner worlds or creativity. Instead, as we've read but previously in this course, the arts are integral aspects of our daily inquiries, of children's daily inquiries, and of the entire research and pedagogical process. So here, art is a meeting place where material, body, thought, and theory come together and propose something. So in these photos, weaving activates our attention to the overlappings and codependencies in this project between kabuya, which is the local grass that you see here used in basketry, and plastics that came from sakio bags that lace much of the riverbanks in Cuenca. So these plastic fibers literally hold together the sides of riverbanks, and they're increasingly replacing the roots of trees. So we've been thinking about these codependencies, both toxic and life-giving, through processes of weaving together. So weaving here is our method, and photography and videography help us to make these processes and emerging theorizations visible. So Springate, Kind, and Irwin write that artists, researchers, teachers engaged in artography are living lives of inquiry, lives full of curiosity, punctuated by questions, searching for deeper understandings while interrogating assumptions, asking oneself questions that linger between, amid, and or within visual, textual, theoretical, analytical, and pedagogical curricular matters. Is to live a life committed to inquiry, active engagement, and discomfort. So artography offers several renderings to think with in artistic and pedagogical processes of research, not as prescriptive methods, but overlapping and emergent resonances that might give shape to an orientation. So they think with contiguity, the overlapping interrelatedness in between spaces, where things meet in spaces of difference, and in this liminal space, new thought processes become possible. So the name artography itself is purposeful in that the words art and graphy, or image and text, are proposed to work together in ways which play off one another toward new forms of subjectivity. They also think with living inquiry. So in taking up living inquiry through artistic practice, the research process becomes malleable and open, where unpredictable encounters transform us, as Anna Singh writes, and that we're not in control of ourselves, but we're open to becoming affected. So Deleuze writes that through such encounters, growing intensities of an event move to overtake us, and something in the world forces us to think. So in this way, thought doesn't originate in human consciousness, nor can a preparation of methods compel us to think. But thinking with the BC Early Learning Framework, responding to these intensities with pedagogical narrations, via video, photography, and our writing processes, educators and children might tentatively settle into glowing moments, as McClure would say, within an inquiry that shimmer and that draw our attention in ways which produce new theorizations about our relations with a particular concept or idea. So artographers also think with metonymy, an interplay between content. So the ways in which image, text, image and image, or image and video rupture a familiar assumption and provoke movement to new thought through ambiguity. They also think with metaphor to stretch the linguistic boundaries that determine what something is and propose what something might become. To displace the original signifier or work that represents an object to a new, not yet fully formed, but a way to dance between meanings of things. They're also thinking with openings as ruptures in preconceived knowledge, drawing on previous conversations that we've had. Openings might emerge with moments of epistemological or ontological silence, or when our thinking stutters for a moment. They also think with excess as a concept. Excess is essentially things that have been disregarded as invaluable. Excess can be thought of as the seemingly mundane materials or phenomena which, in more systematic forms of research, educational research, might be considered as a surplus or an irrelevant component that doesn't serve the dominant narrative. So existing beyond regulation and control, excess is located in the periphery. And Springet has described excess as that which lies outside the acceptable. She writes that excess is, quote, the monstrous, the wasteful, the leftover, the unseen, as well as the magnificent and the sublime, end quote. So excess is the never yet known aspects of phenomena that are materializations sort of potential. So in artography, excess is valued as an integral space for possible thought. And lastly, this isn't included in the article, but I think that it might be helpful in our processes of living inquiry to also consider juxtaposition as a concept and as a rendering. So educators can use juxtaposition to play with the conceptual boundaries of materials and ideas, putting ideas to strange uses and positioning them in ways which realign systems of thought. So juxtaposition can call on us to fold materials and ideas together and apart to highlight and perhaps even distort their familiarity toward new compositions of difference. So with juxtaposition, we can gather unique combinations of objects, images, textures, concepts, not to present dualisms, but to suspend, reconfigure, and complicate meaning in playful ways. So considering processes of inquiry where knowledge is co-constructed through acts of making, through collective processes with others, where ideas gather and not into a sort of form. But in thinking about these formations that emerge, we're not staying there. These forms aren't static or stable. Knowledge is transformative, and though it might settle somewhere for a little while, it never stays in one place, and it's never located within a static object or a tangible piece of art. As Wu writes this week, she says, quote, each material work is not only an artwork itself, but also a fragment that forms a larger process-based artistic practice. So this requires particular dispositions and orientations to research and pedagogy, and the role of educators becomes very different than one might assume in a more traditional classroom situation where managerial logics of regulation and order often determine how curriculum is enacted and how knowledge is produced. Wu draws on Felix Guattari's question, how do you bring a classroom to life as if it were a work of art? And we're going to be thinking with this question in your portfolio entry 7, but we're reconfiguring it a little bit more to attend more to processes of art making as something becoming. Considering what art does to inquiry work. So we'll be asking, how do you bring something to life as if it were a process of art? So this week in your portfolio entry 7, you're going to be taking an artographic orientation to living inquiry. You're going to be thinking about how do you bring something to life as if it were a process of art. So you can think with one of the renderings of artography, contiguity, living inquiry, metonymy, metaphor, openings, or excess, or juxtaposition if you like, and discuss what this element might bring to your work as a teacher researcher. So particularly, you're going to be considering how might this rendering enliven your inquiry as an artistic process. So you can consider your processes of photography, of writing, of videography as your methods, and then consider what this rendering does to your orientation in your living inquiry projects. So this entry will take form as a 200 to 300 word written response, and you may also include images if you wish. So in your virtual collaboratory groups this week, I want you to discuss some of the processes that have been happening in your inquiry assignments. So consider this rendering, one of the renderings from artography, as a lens to view your inquiry project. How does your group envision this rendering within your inquiry project? How do you see it as situated within your living inquiry assignments? So also just a reminder that your inquiry assignments are due this weekend. So please submit those either November 14th or 15th on eLearn. And I look forward to seeing them and hearing about your virtual collaboratory discussions and viewing your portfolios this week. Thanks, everyone.